Hi, everyone, and welcome to our God Talk discussion group. We're so happy to see everybody here. This is just wonderful. Our group is coming at you from Taos, New Mexico, and um, uh, we're going to. I'm just gonna. We're just gonna start with introductions and a little icebreaker question. And what we do with our introductions is you just say the name that you want to be called and your pronouns, and then um, uh, our icebreaker question for the night is your favorite flavor of lollipop. So I will start. We'll start with our little group here. I'm Carol, and she, her, and I like watermelon. Hi, Krager. So Marco, let's go to you next.
Okay, thank you. I can
He said, I'm Army ROTC, but that's not your name. We don't have to call you Army, do we?
I can do.
We have to? Well, say your actual name.
Marco,
And what are your pronouns?
I got you back. I got you back. I got
He
you
said, I'm
back.
he, him, but I like to be called King Marco. Okay.
Marco,
And what's your favorite flavor of lollipop?
well, I got it.
Chocolate? Like a Tootsie Roll? Like a Tootsie Pop? Okay. Okay. You next.
The chocolate, actually, I agree with that. I am Lisa. I am she, her, and I love a great lollipop.
Nice. Okay, let's go to Suzette.
I am Suzette, she, her. And yeah, I think Marco started the chocolate lollipop thing. I thought that was just me, but apparently not. The Tootsie Roll lollipop with the chocolate in the middle, the chocolate, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, nice.
Will you say something? What, Suzette, would you just say something about Bob's ministry?
Bob Stubblefield is a very active, engaged in-person person at Resurrection Metropolitan Community Church. And Bob has lots of roles, but one of his roles is the social justice ministry at Resurrection, basically bringing us a lot of information about what's happening relative to our community, with politics and voting and things like that. So, Bob, maybe you could tell us just a little tiny bit about the social ministry and what you are trying to do and how we can join you.
Yeah, we're about giving a voice and an outlet for supporting advocates. And really it's on behalf of all of our members that, that we're sitting here, we're bringing y'all information that y'all need to make informed choices, who you support politically, uh, and who you support for dog catcher. Equality is a solution for addressing imbalanced social systems. And this is what I really like. Justice can take equality one step further by fixing the systems in which that lead to long-term sustainable, equitable access for generations. So really we have our scope is voting and legislative engagement. We do environmental sustainability. We just finished the 2024 walked into HIV. We have a voting 411 session coming up right before the election. During when the Texas legislature is meeting, we get a legislative advocacy days where take a bus from Houston, go up to Austin, you meet with your legislatures on certain days. This year we did HIV Advocacy Day, Equality Day, and Interfaith Ministry Day. So we were up there for three through legislative advocacy days. And I get really excited during the legislative session. And that's really when we need to be most active and our voices really need to be out there. But did y'all know if I'll give y'all just a few facts. Texas is home to 7.2 million poor and low income eligible voters, but that makes up 33.76% of the electorate. So if all the poor and low income people voted, we could sway the elections to the outcomes we really wanted. But we just can't get people to vote. And Sunday, it was the Next Gen group was meeting right next to my voting table. And Nelda asked them something about voting, and they said that they didn't really care to vote because their vote didn't matter. And that was when I slid a piece of paper over there to get them access to some information. But you know that we really have to teach our young folks because I mean they've seen such a horrible political environment lately, especially here in Texas, taking away the rights and women's maternal care. They're just hitting us on all sides right now. So it's really difficult here in Texas, especially, and other Republican led states. I'm not being political here. I'm just saying. Right. So that's it.
You're on mute, Carol.
Carol, you're on mute.
Okay, so we know you're Bob,
Oh,
and
he and
you can
him,
tell us your pronouns and your lollipop flavor.
and great with the chocolate inside.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you call on who you want to go next?
How about Kreger?
I'm Kreger, he, they, and my favorite lollipop, I'm with Bob. It's great all the way. It's my favorite Gatorade too. I can't.
How about Sylvia?
I'll go next. My name is Sylvia. I'm she, her. I'm here with my wife, Norma. I'm she, her. My favorite's cherry. I'm not sold on the chocolate on the middle, but I do like cherry. I usually will eat it and then throw the chocolate away. I may be outnumbered here.
My favorite is cherry as well.
Monique? You're on mute.
Okay, got the mute off.
Okay.
My name is Monique, and I'm she, they, and my favorite is watermelon and apple.
Nice.
Mhm.
Okay, that leaves us with Reverend Denise.
All right, I'm Reverend Denise, or just Denise, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am right there with you, Sylvia and Norma. It's cherry all the way. Don't put anything in the middle.
What a travesty.
Okay.
Just kidding. Okay, well, tonight we're going to talk some about the protests, the student protests that have been going on around the country. And I just want to say a couple things about the rules. I put about the touchstones. Put a little bit in the chat. Just a reminder. It's okay to disagree. We're not here to teach or change anyone's mind. This is not really a debate. It's just a discussion. And we just want to avoid shaming or blaming ourselves or others. And we want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk as well if they want to. So student protest, so kind of started at Columbia this time around, which was also a nexus of student protest regarding the Vietnam conflict in 1968. Now, I won't pretend to understand all the complexity of what's going on in Gaza. And, you know, we're not here to convince each other or choose sides, but what I would like to see us do is to discuss how we, as people of faith, how we decide, how we choose how to behave in the world, what our priorities are. Where do we see God in these decisions? So let me just tell you what I understand about the sides of these protests. Most of the protesters are called the protests themselves are called pro-Palestinian, and you hear a lot of chants like divest and disclose. So in other words, the protesters are calling for their universities to stop their investments in companies that support Israel or weapons manufacturers. A lot of these initial videos, which Suzette is going to show some photographs of which kind of look like the police are using excessive force to control some of the peaceful demonstrators who seem to be just demanding free speech. On the other hand, detractors say that the protests are becoming increasingly destructive and violent and are crossing the line into anti-Semitism. The rebuttal, again, would say that there's a big difference between anti-Zionism, in other words, opposing the support of Israel as a separate state, as a political entity that occupies and controls Palestine, and anti-Semitism. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the peaceful demonstrations more close to home. For instance, at Rice University, there hasn't been any violence there. But I would say that some of these protests really are being linked to the ones that happened in 1968, because I mean, there's been a lot of protest in the meantime between 1968 and now, but nothing quite like the numbers that we're seeing today. And you might remember, like at Kent State, there were 4 students killed in those protests. So a question that we have is did you ever participate in a protest, and how did that make you feel?
Why? Why? So I can start us off. Back in the 80s, I guess I don't know if you would call it I guess it is a protest. So not necessarily on a college campus. Are you speaking specifically on college campus or just in general?
In general.
Yeah. So there's a person who was accused of assaulting, ultimately raping, and killing someone in North Houston area. And there were a lot of people who felt that he was innocent. And so at that time, I actually worked for a government agency, and we weren't allowed to participate in any kind of civil protests and stuff like that. And so I did, along with several other people, and we protested in Conroe, Texas, as well as in the state capitol, and so it was a risk to my job. And at that time in Conroe, it really wasn't safe to be a dark-skinned person in Conroe at that time, and so, or a Black person, and so that was also a risk of life in that regard. And so how I felt about it was, it's like when you take up a cause that you feel is worthy of change, then the question is, what are you willing to risk to speak out? And obviously I was willing to risk everything, but I didn't realize that we were going to end up on the front page of the news, our pictures, when we when we went to Austin. And so that was kind of scary, but ultimately he was freed. And so that was, you know, to know that I participated in helping someone to ultimately get freed, you know, even though it was a one person, small, minuscule effort, but, and how it felt, it was scary. You know, I went that morning, realizing that I may not come back home.
That is incredibly powerful, and I don't think any effort like that is minuscule.
Wow,
And
good job.
what incredible results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I remember that case, Denise, because I'm from Conroe, so I followed that case closely. And it was great that he was released finally, justice was made.
Kreger?
Okay, before I do my statement, I just want to ask Sylvia, how is your mom? Because we were praying for her earlier today.
Thank you. She did well. She came out of surgery about 2 o'clock. And the surgeon said everything went well. So they're just, they're observing her now, making sure she doesn't have any reaction from the sedation. And hopefully everything went well. It was a cardiac ablation. She was an AFib RVR and they couldn't convert her. So
Thank you. Okay,
thank you
thanks.
for praying.
Well, you're welcome. So I went, I think it was shortly after, what was it, the Parkland mass shooting? A bunch of us from Resurrection went to the protest downtown. It wasn't so much a protest, but we were really trying to call for changes in gun laws. You know, because we had just had another mass shooting of all those high school students, and it was kind of exhilarating. The only danger I was in that day was, you know, getting squished by the hundreds of thousands of people. I don't even know how many thousands of people were downtown, but we walked right past Ted Cruz's office and had some, you know, there wasn't any, there was no violence, there was no shouting or anything like that. It was simply, I think it was called March for Our Lives is what it was called. So it was a long walk through the streets of downtown just to try to bring awareness to the need for tighter gun laws in this country. So yeah, it was enthralling to be a part of something that was so big. But at the end of the day, I don't think anything really changed. If anything, the gun laws have gotten worse. Now you can open carry and whatever else.
I think the protests that I've been involved in are pretty, sorry, Bob, I didn't see your hand just a second, have been pretty tame, like the women's marches, wearing, but they were exciting to see everybody kind of fighting for the same thing. The first one, I think it was 2017, in January, and everybody wearing their pussy hats, and, you know, it just, I think the first one I went to was in Albuquerque, and then the following year in Taos, which was a pretty small group on a corner. Where in our, you know, we're a pretty small community, and anyway, so I guess certainly not risking life like Denise did or anything like that, but it felt very empowering to me to be a part of that, just like you know, pride parades and things like that feel. Bob?
Yeah, I was living in Washington, D.C. during the worst part of the AIDS crisis during the late 80s, early 90s. So I was in the hotbed of the activity then. So I was a really big activist back in the day where we were trying to get really even our government agencies to acknowledge AIDS and to get medications, the pipeline from approval to patient to be a shorter time than decades. So we got a lot accomplished. I worked for the federal government again myself, and I wasn't supposed to be protesting. I worked for the Office of Inspector General, so I had a security clearance. So on a couple of occasions on the weekend, I was able to go and lay down with everybody on the die-ins on the streets, but mostly I was a protester in the background, organizing and helping other people. And sometimes we would to get so the cops wouldn't know exactly where we were showing up. We would have kind of other protests planned, fake protests, so it would kind of divide the forces. But that was a scary time back then because they did not want us anywhere near a TV camera. And it was ACT UP from New York City that came down and organized everyone in DC. And of course, there was theater people and everyone else. So they were very theatrical and they got all the news cameras there. So they really knew how to do a protest. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth. Did some apartheid protests back in the day. And I kind of see this situation with Israel a lot like the apartheid issue in the matter more of the protest and then putting up tent cities and stuff like that, barricading themselves. So that's kind of where I've been.
Okay. Suzette, did you take down your hand? Okay.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to get off the track of the topic of the protests that we're talking about tonight. But I've been, your question was, have you been part of a protest? And I have been part of some small protests, but I think there's new ways to protest, and part of an organization called the National Federation of Business Women's and Professional Clubs, and it's a national organization. It's 100 years old, and they have a very strong advocacy platform, and they're very involved in the ERA. So the actual ERA asked us to take part in a protest that they were having back when a vote was happening some time ago. And they actually streamed this protest and speeches and stuff like that and asked for our organization to stream it along with them so that we could share the information. So while not everybody could be in Washington, D.C. for this, they could be a part of it in a live real-time way where they could see who was there and what was being said, and they could feel like they were a part of it. And I don't think anything takes the part of, or takes the place of actually being somewhere, but we always have a way to have a voice. And I'm a strong supporter of the ERA, so it's important to me that there's different ways for me to get educated and learn about, ways to use my voice and ways, things that are happening with voting and things like that I can influence. Even in the beginning where you said, one vote, why would I vote? It doesn't matter. Well, it's a collective thing that we're doing, and by being a part of an organization who has that same vision as I do makes me feel like I have a voice. So anyway, that was my
that's a really good point. And I remember some of the marches offering some of the disability groups that I'm involved in offering like online ways to participate and things like that, and that's very meaningful. And I just I thought of I went to a church when I lived in Las Cruces, which is, as you know, very close to the border, and right during that time that there was a lot of problems. That's really when all the problems with ICE and the cruelty and the cages and those kind of things was really becoming well publicized. And we had a lot of protests there about immigration reform and things like that, and just trying to be fair to people and giving people a chance. And the pastor of the church that I went to, it was a UCC Disciples of Christ called First Christian, and the pastor was a short, white-haired white lady. And she's like, they always want me to come head the protest because, no, it gets lots of media attention when a little old lady gets arrested and
Yeah.
thrown down. So, I think no matter who we are, I think sometimes things that we think are detractors to our ability to make waves might actually be an asset. And so it just kind of depends on how you look at it. I wanted to say just a little bit about Denise.
Yeah, I was just gonna add also that I participated and supported a protest within UFMCC, our denomination, when during our general conference back in 2016, and was instrumental in helping I don't want to say so much as an organization of it, but to keep it from actually interrupting one of the major services, but to sort of negotiate with those who wanted to participate in the protest. And I did protest with them, but also to do it in a way that would make the statement, but not actually interrupt the yelling out and the calling out and that sort of stuff. And so that was a very interesting time for us as a denomination. And that was when we were starting to see an uprise in the killing of Black and brown people. And but I just wanted to mention that because we were talking about the different approaches and effectiveness of those approaches.
And how effective was that?
Oh, it was very, and I got pictures I can send y'all of us holding Black Lives Matter signs during the general conference. And I'm sure we really upset a whole lot of people because they just thought it was the rudest thing ever that you could do, but it was also a necessary thing. And our young people, it was the way that to be able to support the young people who wanted to do the protests. And so we couldn't not support them and then had to participate alongside of them. And so yeah, I think it was very effective.
There's something really powerful about just standing up for what you believe in. I wanted to talk a little bit about Rice University just because there hasn't been any violence at Rice, or at least not last time I checked the news reports. Just because it's so close, because it's in Houston and so therefore I think just close to the church and everything like that. So what they did at Rice was they created a liberated zone, and they announced a 2-day series of events and started construction on what they called an apartheid wall. And here's what one person said: we're trying to liberate this space for a popular university where we can bring education that is not taught at Rice, bring education around the issues of genocide we're seeing now, talk about the history of Palestine, the history of resistance, the history of occupation. And so the apartheid wall is planned as an 8 by 12 foot structure. I think it's up now, with a mural that mirrors the separation barrier that Israel constructed more than 20 years ago on the occupied West Bank. So art with the mural on it will be symbolic of Palestinian life and resistance. And it's also symbolic because it's just across the corner from the Baker Institute and the Berlin Wall. It provides an interesting dichotomy between the Western Wall and the resistance. So I just thought that was a very interesting way to kind of bring in historical struggles and things like that into the current conversation, a way to use something, visible symbols and art to try to, you know, make a point since that time. And you were saying something earlier about student protests. Student protests, I think, are particularly powerful because if you can influence a university, you know, it makes a big difference in the world. And what was it you said? It like
Just looking back at all of the incidents through the decades, the kids get pounded on, you know, for having protests, but they're usually on the right side of history. So I look at these kids, and there are some there that are just kind of caught up in it. I love that a reporter interviewed these two girls, and their first thing was, well, we don't really know why we're here, but we're just, this is where the action is, kind of thing. And I'm thinking, really, come on, kids that really know why they're there and they're passionate about it. And and it my parents, I was raised in a very uptight Southern Baptist family, and you didn't make waves, and it was all, what will the neighbors think? So, going to a protest, that was absolutely horrendous, from our community. And I feel like a late bloomer, but as I've gotten older, I'm so grateful there are people who are passionate enough to get out there on the front line, for what they believe in, because it was something that I did not grow up thinking it was acceptable. So
let's talk a little bit about some of the subtle ideas that come behind some of the biases that people develop between groups. I'm like Christian and Jewish and Muslim, especially since we're a Christian group. We want to know, we want to think about how we, how we view other people, and we don't want to, I think we can all agree, to tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we can all agree that we don't want to contribute to the prejudice and violence and oppression that goes on in the world. And so I'd like to just kind of think a little bit about how we as Christians think about that, and what is the basis of our wanting to be inclusive and to build bridges between communities. And while y'all are kind of thinking about that, Suzette, could you play that video? This is Rabbi Estes was our guest recently, and he did a sermon at Resurrection not very long ago. And this video is way back from 2011, so it doesn't have anything to do with the current conflict. It actually has to do with a Texas senator. So, so this is way back, but I think it is a really nice example from someone we know, to just discuss some of these biases.
Texas is a Republican stronghold, but are the right kind of Republicans really in power there? John Oliver headed to the Lone Star State to find out.
Republicans in Texas are a pretty common sight, but Jewish Republicans like Joe Strauss are about as rare as a pork rib on a prairie mule. 2 years ago, Strauss became the first Jewish Speaker of the state House, but that meant trouble when he came up for re-election in January.
Republican groups across the state have surfaced calling for Strauss to be removed in favor of a, quote, more Christian speaker.
And the charge was led by state Republican Party official John Cook, who wrote in an email, "We elected a House with Christian conservative values. We now want a true Christian conservative running it." Could it possibly be that a Jew would be driven out of yet another desert land? I made a pilgrimage to Texas to hear one more tale of this forsaken people.
People claiming that someone couldn't do a job because they weren't Christian and in public service is very disturbing and scary.
But Rabbi, don't you think that the laws of Texas could only really probably be shepherded by a Christian Speaker of the House?
No.
Whoa. Sorry, I wasn't expecting you to say no to that at all.
Many times people use the word Christian as a synonym for good.
Christian doesn't necessarily just mean good, it just means better.
Okay, that's really problematic to me because I know of Christians who are definitely not better than Jews.
Name three.
Name three Christians that are not good.
But they're not better than Jews.
Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin.
Okay, name four.
Kaczynski.
Do you not think it's a little offensive, Rabbi, that whenever you think of Christians, you just think of serial killers? But was this really a case of anti-Semitism, or was it, as has been the case throughout Jewish history, a simple misunderstanding? I spoke to one of the leaders of the Oust Strauss movement, David Welch of the Texas Pastor Council.
Joe Strauss's faith was never part of this issue and isn't to this moment.
So this is not about him being Jewish?
Not at all. We called out and raised up the call that we didn't have to accept Joe Strauss as the anointed one.
All Welch cares about is that people vote their faith, whatever that faith is. So, in 90% Christian Texas, Jews would get a fair 10% of the vote.
The principles, we believe, that are good for all are what we should be following, and that doesn't mean that we have a religious litmus test for the elected official.
Can we at least agree that we don't want a Muslim speaker?
I would say right now, yes, for a variety of reasons. Again, we have deep concerns about the loyalty of Muslims to the Constitution.
Right, so you say to your congregation, you can vote for whoever you want, regardless of their denomination,
right,
apart from a Muslim.
Yes.
And lo, they did contradict themselves. And so it was, on the 23rd day of the month of Adar, the election would come to pass. And whilst this race clearly wasn't about religion, it couldn't hurt to hold a prayer vigil on the steps of the State House the night before the vote.
Father, we plead with you that you would give us a godly, humble leader of the Texas House.
Yes, Lord.
And yet again, the Hebrews were vanquished.
House Speaker Joe Strauss won re-election after a hard-fought battle.
Wait, what? He won? Rabbi, Mazel Tov.
Thanks. I really don't see the need for congratulations.
It was a miracle. It looked like he only had enough votes to carry one district, and instead he carried 8.
But it wasn't that kind of vote.
And that day in Texas forever came to be known as Yom
No.
The Jewish festival of Yom HaChech.
There's no Yom HaChech.
And so 'twas that a small band of conservative Jews triumphed over a larger, equally conservative band of conservative Christians.
Thanks, Suzette. I don't know if anybody else could see the video rolling, but it didn't look like, but still we could hear what was going on. So that's
You couldn't see it? Oh, no.
no. But I think we got the point. So it was good to hear it.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, I think that as a queer group, collectively speaking, we're marginalized in many ways, in multiple ways, and so sometimes we kind of forget that we also have areas of privilege, and just being Christian in the United States gives us a certain amount of privilege. So how do we negotiate that, and how do we keep from marginalizing other groups?
What?
I think you just have to be aware, self-aware, hopefully.
Yeah, I thought that was really cute, the way that he brought in, oh, well, you can't hold up good values, not if you're Muslim, not, I mean, he just really brought it to the front. That was, and it's really striking that somebody in high leadership would not even recognize how what that meant to have that kind of prejudice.
I think the protest at Rice have left room to have dialogue. And that's what's been missing from a lot of these other conflicts that happen on campuses, is they just aren't set up for dialogue. If it's just people yelling at each other and hurling anti-Semitic and then other anti-Christian comments, when it becomes a battle and there aren't any words spoken anymore, then you've just kind of defeated the purpose.
That's wow, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Dialogue is crucial, and that's we've been talking about that some in the Wednesday night book club, talking across the divide of how to have dialogue with people. But first you have to have a setup where people can discuss. That's such a great point. What else came up for y'all with that video?
What?
Suzette?
I just think that in the world we live in today, and I know I'm always going back to, online stuff and social media and all that stuff, is we didn't used to have the kind of voice that we have today. We had less opportunity to say how we felt or to say we didn't like something, because it was all broadcast to us. Now, with mediums like Twitter and Facebook, you have two-way channels where you can show a video and people can tell you how they feel about it, or you can have a live stream, or you can project a Zoom like this, and people can get on it and say how they feel. Hopefully in some kind of a controlled environment, so that it's not, not hurting anyone else. But it's very helpful, I think, we had a couple of Instagram videos that I had pulled, but if you can't see my screen, it's that I don't want to take the time to show them at this moment. But you can, if you use a hashtag on social media, you can pull up topics about anything. So if you're interested in knowing, what it is that a certain college is talking about, or what it is that a certain politician is talking about, you can use hashtags to find those conversations and participate in them.
You're muted, Carol.
You're muted again, Carol.
Sorry about that. Let me think back what I was social media does give us a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges, and it can get a lot more pointed and mean, just because people feel more anonymous, even if their name's on there. They just people feel however they feel, they don't seem to use the same boundaries that they would in social settings.
They're yelling at the TV.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. I wonder if we might even look a little bit deeper at kind of, it seems to me like like some Christian belief systems, a lot of I guess what we've been calling evangelical groups tend to think of we're the only ones that are going to be saved. We're the only ones that are going to heaven. This and this makes us better than other people, and we need to try to bring other people. Other people are just wrong, and we need to bring them into our belief system. So I think how we think about what our belief means, I think if we think of our religion as more than just a way to get into heaven, as if we think of religion more in terms of relationship with the divine and relationship with each other, then that sort of belief doesn't lend itself as much to beating other religions over the head with our, it doesn't lead to, it leads to more openness and less need to feel like we have to save somebody else or change someone's mind and make them Christian or something like that. What do you think are other bases, are, why are we open? Why do we want to be inclusive, and why do we want to build bridges? What's the basis for that in our faith?
We have to be, because we were excluded for so long and closeted for so long. And, there's only been 2 times when I personally witnessed the sanctuary at Resurrection packed full of people with not even a seat left. One was Carlos Rivera's memorial service in 2013. People loved him like nobody's business. And the second time was after the Pulse nightclub shooting, when Resurrection hosted a interfaith service. And there was people there from, there was rabbis, there was, people from the Muslims, where everybody was there. The sanctuary was packed. And, I would just say the community of humanity showed up that night to mourn the tragic loss of what happened at Pulse. And, the reason people were there is because it is the community of humanity. It's trying to have a broader view of everyone should be included. Everyone should be invited to the table.
Bob, you said Jesus. Say more.
Yes. Well, that's what we're called to do, is to be more Christ-like and to go out and, we're supposed to protect the poor and the widow and the innocent. So that's what we try to do in our own various ways, I hope. And I think that's the core, I don't know, that for me, that's the core message of Christianity is just helping each other through this life,
I would agree with that. I would say in a nutshell, just my own personal belief system boils down to God is love, love is God.
Yeah.
Let's spread the love any way we can.
Isn't it kind of thread through time that religion is probably one of the strongest reasons why or that we would use to differ from other people. Like, my faith tells me to be this and you're not it, so you're not okay. And I'm going to react to that in whatever way that happened. But there's been, over time, since you know, since the time of Jesus, you know, religious wars and, you know, people being tortured over religious beliefs. And it's just like, why is that so, you know, why is that such a trigger for us as humans? But it can be scary as well as comforting. So, you know, because there's people out there that use their religion as the reason.
Well, I will say that it's just what's happening right now, particularly with regard to the Palestinian and Israeli crisis, is it is so complicated, and it is just extremely, extremely complicated, and at the same time, you know, what we were saying earlier is that it's, you know, if you think of, you know, it's hard to watch, you know, no, you don't want anyone to be killed in any capacity, you know, for a political reason or something like that, especially innocent people who aren't even necessarily affiliated with their government. And so it just gets complicated. It's extremely, extremely complicated. But I think the risk is the unintentional consequences that occur. So, you know, if you speak about Israel in a particular way, it increases the potential violence against Jewish individuals, because that's a real thing. We saw that in South Carolina, you know, with all the protests were going on with the tiki torches and all that kind of stuff. And so it just becomes very, very, you know, complicated, but it's also important. I wouldn't want people to stay on the sidelines if it were me that were being targeted. And so, you know, it's a lot of real risk, but it's also important to find ways to communicate in ways that does not incentivize more violence against any people. But it is truly, you know, a very complicated issue. And then the other piece of this, going back to the evangelicals, is that there's a crisis within the evangelical ideology, where a lot of people today are looking back and reflecting and saying, you know, I am an evangelical, but I don't share the same beliefs with all evangelicals, kind of like what we say in general when it comes to Christianity.
We have, as the denomination, I think we've been quite revolutionary in just in our being, and I think one of the ways that shows is just by inviting more to the table, and just I think open communion is one of the key principles of just showing how we don't exclude, and that's really important. I love what you said about how important it is how we say things, and that's a difficult thing.
Yeah, going. It's okay to get big, but remember in my heart.
Remember in your heart.
Good job.
Yeah, just remembering how to be careful about what we say, isn't it? How to be loving in everything that we say. That's a tough way to do things, but this group is very inspirational in how to do that. We're coming toward the end of our time, so I want to make sure that if anybody has any last thoughts, that they get to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Stubblefield, for coming to this. Thank you, Bob.
Well, I hope to
for being
attend
our
more.
Special guest.
Yeah.
And Bob
that's the only
is
that get me used to coming on Thursdays.
What I would just add is that, you know, what I was leading into is how important it is to make the attempt to understand the issues. So that, because, you know, a lot of this voice, you know, when people feel that their voices are silent, then this kind of protest and violence erupts.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to hear and try to really understand what is actually happening. And again, to just know that it's extremely complicated.
And that brings us back to what Bob said too about dialogue. Just so important to try to listen to other people, to other sides of an issue, and not just stay in our own echo chambers.
Hey, why got back?
Marco just said who did you say, Kreger? He said, did you want to do the prayer, or would you like?
I'll do the prayer.
Hey.
Okay. Holy Spirit, Holy God, Holy Mother, Holy Father, we thank you for this time and this conversation. And we did, in fact, have dialogue this evening, and it's just wonderful to be able to participate in this safe space. We hope that those will come behind us and watch this and maybe get something out of it. And the dialogue is always open for the online church. If people do pick this up later, there's dialogues that go on the online church and also in person. And as we leave this session tonight, God, we just ask that you give us the, give us the strength, give us the wisdom, give us the presence to always be mindful of what we're saying, what we're doing, how we're acting, what is our potential impact in the various circles in which we travel. And let us come into the awareness that if we're not acting out of love, then we aren't truly representing you. We ask all of these things in the holy name of Christ this evening. Amen.
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 Wow, that was beautiful. That was beautiful.
Bye-bye. Bye.
We're gonna stop the recording.